Okay, you're good then.
Hey folks, can you hear me okay? Hey folks, can you hear me okay? Alrighty, well, I'll try to speak a little more softly. I guess it's basically usual drill this week. We're continuing to work on the uh, Animesh stuff. It is coming along well. The uh, latest stuff there all has to do with trying to get wireframes and selections to work correctly. You know, when you right click on items, you want to get the correct menu and you want the thing to stop moving and show a nice wireframe and all that good stuff. So um, I'm poking around on that this week, and that's all behaving pretty well. So yeah, generally I think the thing is coming along well. It's not quite at the stage where I can give a decent estimate on getting a release candidate out, but not a huge number of remaining obstacles. So that's all looking good. Um, let's see, Bakes on Mesh. I don't think there's anything really new there. Anchor's been doing some investigation on some other unrelated issues recently, but I think they've made some good headway on that. I hope we'll be able to get back on that soon. So I think that's about it in terms of news such as it is. But we're open for questions if folks want to talk about anything else. Let's see. There's a question about baking system being applied to meshes. Will it support transparency? Not. I'm not quite sure what you mean by supporting transparency. I, I think the behavior you'll get if there is, an active transparent channel in the baked um, texture is that it'll produce holes in the model, similar to the way that that works today with the avatars, but we're not really at the stage of being able to test drive that yet, so I'm not positive how it's all going to shake out. Question on increasing the building size. We don't have any specific plans along those directions right now. Obviously there's trade-offs between being able to make cool stuff and being able to generate not so cool stuff that takes up a lot of space. What's the particular motivation there? Okay, yeah, so question about being able to bring in large pre-made landscapes or converting large existing builds into mesh. Yeah, I can see that for that sort of thing, it'd be easier to be able to generate very large objects. What kind of scale are the things that you're trying to bring in? I silenced all the media. I'm not sure where we're getting all the racket, but that seemed to quiet it down. You may want to do that too. Okay, yeah, I think the sound situation is a little better. Yeah, what is the current limit? 64? Yeah, how that would affect the land impact? I'm honestly not sure. It's a fairly complex formula that involves kind of the area of the object and how much kind of what its expected dimensions are going to be in terms of like how much screen space it's going to take up and so forth. So I think generally having one big object versus multiple smaller ones is probably going to have a higher land impact the way the calculations work, but it would kind of have to be looked at piece by piece. All right. Well, if someone wants to file a JIRA on this and add supporting comments, that would be helpful. I think, generally whenever we're looking at this stuff, it's always going to be the trade-off between, who's going to benefit versus, what kind of, undesirable consequences it might have. And if we raise the limit, we'd have to be careful to make sure that things continue to work correctly with encroachment checks and that sort of thing. Discouraging antisocial objects. So if you want to file a JIRA, I'd be happy to take a look at it. It's not obviously part of the animated object project in itself. It's something we'd have to look at separately. Animated landscapes, that'd be fun. I'm not sure what it's going to do to the physics, though. Let's see, I have a question about, are we far enough along to have performance impact assessment? Not really. I haven't, since I'm still trying to just get things to work correctly, I haven't spent a lot of time looking at the performance impact. It's certainly not going to be as high as it would be to have, that many additional avatars, but depending on how many rigged vertices you're shoving around, it can get expensive. As we've mentioned, I think the relevant test for speed is going to be, how many joints are actively animated and rigged to, rather than just how many bones are in the scene. The ones that aren't really doing anything are going to have a pretty minimal impact and aren't going to affect the graphics at all. There's a question about whether we've addressed the memory issues with animations. Which memory issues? I mean, short answer, I haven't looked at animation uh, memory at all in the context of this project, but if there's particular things we should be looking at, definitely let us know about it. Yeah, there was a mention that we can worry about some of the performance impact more when we get once we have a project viewer and people can actually do pile-ons. And I think that's right. I'm not going to try to have final stats on performance and land impact before you go to project viewer. I'd rather have people have a chance to go into some test regions and make some stuff, and that gives us some better examples to figure out if we're really costing things correctly or not. So we will basically take a look at that later. I want to do a little bit of looking into it just to make sure that we have the hooks in place to set things like land impact based on whether something is an Animesh / animated object or not. And so for that, we will at least make sure that we have a way to do that, and probably just put in some kind of placeholder value. But it's not going to be the final number that it'll be once we go to release. Cats and dogs test. I like that. And some giant marshmallows in there too. Okay, Beck. I have not heard anything about animation subsystem hoarding memory, so if anybody wants to pass along any pointers to that, that would be great. Let's see. There was one question in chat about the Maya exporter for animations. Not for me. Kathy, do you know anything about that?
Sorry about that. I didn't have my microphone on. Let's see. So, well, we're still waiting on Aura to finish the .anim exporter for Maya. But we do have the BVH exporters for Maya that are both open source. One is for what used to be our restrictions that we used to have, where we could only do translation animations on the M pelvis, and then rotation animations on all the other bones. And then we have Aura had updated that, and it's also available. Where you can do translation animations on all the bones and rotation animations on all the bones.
Oh, that sounds great. Let's see. One question about adding additional options for the uploader. Specify the mesh object physics. That's the kind of thing it's good to have a JIRA for. It's certainly true that very little has changed with the uploader since we initially implemented the mesh project. Basically people have been working on other things. So, if there are things that are a significant pain point, we might get a chance to look at some of them over time, but it's always the usual balancing act, deciding what to prioritize. Oh, anybody having problems?
I know the Second Life uploader doesn't like whiskers or something like that. Because for whatever reason, I can't upload it with whiskers in the Second Life uploader, but I can do it in the Firestorm uploader.
Doesn't like whiskers. This is it an issue with the mesh content you're trying to upload?
Yeah, it's just I'm uploading the whole cat, and
Uh,
I'm trying to add the whiskers, the whisker mesh to the mesh cat, and the
right.
uploader just dies on it. It just gives me an error.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Do you get any kind of an informational message about what the problem is, or it just doesn't take it?
Oh, I don't know if it does. I just, I just
Yeah.
find a way around it. So,
Okay, well, if it's working in Firestorm and it's not working in SL, then that's definitely a bug. If you could if you could file something on that, that would be helpful. If you can give us some kind of a model that demonstrates it, that would be especially good. It's it should be something that's pretty easy to track down if we have a live example that we can test it against.
I haven't actually tried it. Actually, Carrie uploaded it with Firestorm, and but I couldn't do it in the Second Life uploader.
I mean, it's possible that the viewer is enforcing some minimum size, uh, thing or something like that. But obviously, if Firestorm can do it and the back end accepts it, then we're not doing very effective enforcement of whatever it is we think we're enforcing.
I'll definitely try and do it myself, and if I can document anything, I'll write a JIRA for it.
Yeah. Okay, that'd be great. Let's see. There's a question a little ways back about plans on adding preferences, chat windows, automatically ignore and leave all conference ad hoc chats. I I know that that's something that's been discussed recently. I, it's come up in meetings that I've been in, but I don't know, what the status is on that. They're definitely aware of the problem. I know jurors have been filed on that. Yeah, so there's a question about Storm 2055 real mirror reflections on prims. Yeah, the pictures look nice. Is this something that's incorporated in any viewers, or is it just a proposal? Yeah. So it's this mirror reflection thing. If I'm reading it correctly, it's there's some kind of rough prototypes, but it's not at the stage of being a kind of a final code submission. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's obviously if there's a if there's a complete uh, uh, pull request that we can look at, that's going to improve the chances. We'd always be concerned about what the performance impact is going to be, and whether it works reliably on everybody's graphics cards and so forth. But yeah, basically it's something we can take a look at. Yeah, well, I'm not sure what the history of the discussion on mirrors is. Obviously they're potentially scary. It's like even in games, it's not the sort of thing that's widely supported because it's can be super expensive. Yeah, I don't know how hard that would be. Obviously, in the case of water, you can make a lot of simplifying assumptions because it's always there's always only one of it and it's a horizontal plane and so forth. It's going to be more complex if you have to be able to support arbitrary numbers of them anywhere in the scene. All right. So other than reflections, a couple of folks said they had other questions, but I don't think they've posted the questions yet. Anything else? Yeah. Beck, you submitted a Jira about this, didn't you? I'm pretty sure somebody did. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that is in the queue to be looked at. And see what makes sense there. It's you could argue that it should be a viewer change or a server change, but clearly it's not a good thing if they disagree, if they're forcing different rules. Yeah. Okay, so what exactly did you change in the viewer? Yeah, I don't know the history of the thin wall uh, issue in physics. It's it could be a Havoc constraint. It could be a constraint that made sense in some previous version of Havoc and doesn't make sense anymore. But it's something we're gonna have to get some time to look at. You think it's related to physics costing? Does the cost go up as the objects get thinner? Okay. Yep. Okay. Yes, Beck, thanks for pointing that out. It is something we're aware of, and we're going to take a look at. As we get time. You know, clearly it's something that would be nice if we could fix it. Okay. Thanks for the link. All right. Well, any other questions this week? Hey, let's see you fire away.
And Sansa.
Ooh, big chunks of money. Let's see if we can use. You can use Animesh after the project viewer is released, and hopefully that won't be too long. But I don't know when it will be. Visually rigging a legacy prim or non-rigged mesh to an Animesh skeleton bone. Okay, cool. I'll take a look. Thanks.
Now that would be interesting if we could, we're talking about attaching these pets or NPCs or animeshes. That would be interesting if we just had one point, and that was the only point we could attach to.
So if you had a point for things to be attached to animeshes or for animeshes to be attached to other things?
To avatars. I mean, I know you guys said you weren't going to really think about it until we have some test viewers out, but I mean, a lot of people are going to want it.
Yeah, I mean, being able to attach an Animesh, I think, is primarily it's primarily just a question about, performance. Is it going to generate, huge numbers of items that also don't get costed correctly because they don't have land impact? There's not. I don't think there's a huge technical question there. Going the other way around, trying to attach things to Animesh is it's hairier because the object, the animated object is getting controlled by an underlying skeleton that's kind of viewer side only, right? The server doesn't know about it. So um, exactly what you'd be referring to if you're talking about attachment points, I'm not really sure. It's worth thinking about. It's not a bad suggestion, but I'm not really sure how that would shake out.
I thought, you know, riding in Animesh would probably be easy, but now you're saying it's going to be difficult?
I think writing is something else, isn't it? I mean, you can write objects today that don't have attachment points and aren't avatars, right? So there's another mechanism for that.
Well, basically, we're just sitting on it.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't. Yeah, I haven't looked at that yet. I don't know of any reason in principle that you couldn't sit on it. It's more a question of how it's going to interact with the animations, I guess. But since I haven't actually tried it out yet, I'm not sure. Yeah, so there's a few different use cases, really, right? You've got sitting on things. You've got attaching to avatars. You've got having things attached to the Animesh as well, or having it look like it's attached, even if it isn't really. So it's I think those are all kind of separate problems as far as how we'd implement them and how they'd work.
Is it? Is there really a special use case between sitting on an NPC or Animesh versus attaching yourself to it? I don't think there is a difference. I think there's a difference in how you do it. Yeah, definitely. But I don't think the use case is different.
Well, it would be. You're moving with the bone, or not moving with the bone makes a big difference. Imagine you make a horse or something and you're sitting on it, and you're just kind of stationary on top its back while it bobs up and down, versus you moving with it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question of whether you're just sort of following along with the overall motion of the object, which is your standard sitting scenario, or whether um, you need to be updated basically every time some joint changes position in an animation.
And if you try to create another animation for your avatars, they're never going to sync up.
Right, I can understand that, but I just don't, personally, I wouldn't let people do that. I would not let people attach something to a specific bone on an Animesh. That to me is kind of going too far.
Or what about the sitting on case? Do you think that's reasonable?
Well, I think there's all kinds of, people, look at any game, riding your pet is, that's what everyone wants to do. I want a pet tiger that I can ride. So I think it is a use case that's very popular.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the hardcore pet people are definitely want to attach their pet to them. There's so much more you can do with it like that too, you know, and to a specific bone because you kind of need to do that for specific things.
Yeah, I think the issue with attaching to attachment points isn't so much a problem on the viewer side, like how you manage the transformations. I think it's more a problem on the back end because these animishes aren't agents. They don't have um, all of the existing data that's stored for agents about about an agent's attachments. So the question of kind of how you communicate this stuff and how you persist it, I think I think has the potential to be a quite large project on that side of things. Yeah, it's not really about whether they're rigged or not. It's more the back end stuff, how you keep track of what's attached and where it's attached. Yep, I'm sure there'll be lots of things to think about once there's a project viewer. I think we looked at the detaching the head thing in when we were working on Bento. I don't think anybody's actually made it work yet, though. I was talking with Matrice about that at one point.
Shouldn't actually be too hard. Animation wise, that is.
It'll probably get messed up by sliders or something.
I think that's an avatar to do. Zombie or whatever holding its head and walking around, and then having that head work with sliders. That would be interesting.
Yeah, I think it's called cephalophores. There's a whole category of old sculptures and things with people carrying their heads around. It's clearly a neglected area. Yeah, no, don't have an estimate on bakes on mash. As I mentioned, Anchor's been working on some other stuff recently, but that seems to be winding up. The first step, we're trying to get working there is the updates of the baking service and the viewer to support 1024 textures. All right. Well, I need to wrap up a couple minutes early today, but we'll see everybody next week and let you know about the latest things. I feel like people are trying to communicate something about a project viewer. I don't know. It's a little unclear.
Thanks, Veer. We'll be waiting.
All right. Well, I won't make you wait any longer than necessary. Talk to you later.